The sun had barely risen over Fort Ridgeway when the parade ground echoed with boots striking concrete in perfect rhythm. Recruits moved in formation, exhausted but disciplined, every breath measured, every movement watched. This was where careers were shaped or broken, where pressure was intentional and mistakes were remembered. Private First Class Emily Carter stood in the second row, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Sweat rolled down her temples, but her posture never shifted. She had learned early that discomfort was temporary, but reputation was permanent. Drill instructor Sergeant Daniel Price paced in front of the formation like a predator. His voice cut through the morning air, sharp and relentless. "Do you think discipline is optional?" he shouted. "Do you think the battlefield cares about your feelings?" The recruits responded in unison, voices hoarse but loud. "No, Sergeant." Price stopped suddenly in front of Emily. He leaned in too close, his eyes narrowing as if he'd found something to dislike. "You," he said. "You think you're special?" Emily kept her gaze straight ahead. "No, Sergeant." He scoffed. "Funny. You stand like someone who thinks she's better than the rest." She said nothing. Silence, she knew, was safer than arguing. Price circled her slowly. "You know what they say about people like you?" he said loudly enough for others to hear. "They say you could kill someone with your bare hands." A few nervous laughs rippled through the formation. Emily's jaw tightened. Price stepped closer, invading her space. "That true, Carter? You some kind of threat?" Before she could answer, he shoved her shoulder hard. She stumbled but didn't fall. The air changed instantly. Several instructors nearby froze. This wasn't corrective pressure. This wasn't training. This crossed the line. Emily regained her balance and returned to attention, breathing controlled. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't retaliate. Every instinct she had was screaming, but discipline held her in place. Price smirked. "See? All talk." What Price didn't know was that 4 men stood on the observation platform overlooking the ground. 4 men whose careers spanned decades of combat, command, and consequence. Colonel Robert Hayes, Colonel Marcus Reed, Colonel Thomas Walker, and Colonel Jonathan Price. No relation to the drill instructor, had arrived early to review training standards across multiple installations. All 4 were former Navy SEALs. All 4 had seen what happened when authority went unchecked. Colonel Hayes lowered his binoculars slowly. "Did he just put hands on her?" he asked quietly. Colonel Reed nodded once. "Yes." Walker's jaw tightened. "That wasn't corrective contact." Jonathan Price folded his arms. "That was personal." They watched as Sergeant Price continued pacing, barking orders as if nothing had happened. Emily remained steady, her face unreadable. Colonel Hayes turned to the base commander, standing beside them. "Is that standard practice here?" The commander hesitated. "No, sir." "Then why is it happening?" Reed asked. No answer came. The colonels descended the platform without another word. Back on the ground, the recruits were dismissed to hydration stations. Emily moved with the others, but her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her canteen. She focused on breathing, grounding herself. She had been through worse. Much worse. But this was different. This was supposed to be professional. "Carter," a voice said behind her. She turned to see 4 senior officers approaching, flanked by the base commander. Every recruit nearby stiffened. Colonel Hayes spoke calmly. "Walk with us." Emily obeyed. Sergeant Price noticed too late, by the time he reached them. The colonels had already formed a quiet circle with Emily at its center. "Sergeant," Colonel Reed said, his tone flat. "Explain your interaction with this recruit." Price snapped to attention. "Sir, I was applying corrective pressure to maintain discipline." Colonel Walker looked at Emily. "Did you require physical correction?" "No, sir," she said clearly. Jonathan Price stepped closer to the sergeant. "Did you shove her?" Price hesitated. "Sir, that wasn't the question," Hayes said. "Answer it." "Yes, sir." Silence fell heavy. Colonel Reed spoke next. "Do you know who she is?" Price frowned. "A recruit, sir." Hayes nodded slowly. "Incorrect." Emily felt the weight of the moment shift. "She's a prior service transfer," Hayes continued. 8 years. Classified assignments. Psychological screening scores that exceed instructor averages. She's here by choice, not because she failed elsewhere. Price's face drained of color. Walker added, and even if she weren't, your behavior would still be unacceptable. Jonathan Price looked directly at the sergeant. You said she could kill someone. Do you say that to all recruits you shove? I was motivating, sir, Price muttered. Hayes shook his head. No, you were asserting dominance without control. The base commander cleared his throat. Colonels, perhaps we should take this inside. No, Reed said calmly. This is a teaching moment. He turned to Emily. Did you feel threatened? She chose her words carefully. I felt the situation was inappropriate, sir. That was all it took. Colonel Hayes nodded once. Sergeant Daniel Price, you are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Price's mouth fell open. Sir, Walker continued, you will turn in your credentials, your access, and report to administrative review within the hour. Jonathan Price's voice was cold. Your career ends today not because of one mistake, but because of what that mistake reveals. The surrounding recruits watched in stunned silence as the sergeant's authority dissolved in real time. Emily stood quietly, heart pounding. Colonel Reed turned to her. You handled yourself with restraint. That matters. Hayes added, strength without discipline is dangerous. You demonstrated discipline. Later that day, Emily sat alone on a bench near the training field, staring at her boots. The morning replayed in her mind on a loop. Colonel Walker approached and sat beside her. You okay? He asked. Yes, sir. He nodded. You could have reacted. Yes, sir. You didn't. She looked at him. That wouldn't have helped. He smiled faintly. Exactly. News traveled fast. By evening, everyone knew Sergeant Price was gone. Official language cited violation of conduct and abuse of authority. Unofficially, the message was clearer, and O1 was untouchable. The next morning, training resumed under a different instructor. The tone was firm but controlled, demanding but respectful. Emily blended back into the formation. Just another recruit again, that's how she preferred it. Before lights out, she recorded a short message on her phone. If you're watching this on the channel Generals and Truth Stories, make sure you subscribe. These stories aren't about power. They're about responsibility, restraint, and what real leadership looks like when it matters. She ended the recording and laid back on her bunk. Across the base, for colonels reviewed final paperwork. Colonel Hayes signed the last page and leaned back. People think careers end slowly, he said. Sometimes they end in minutes. Reed nodded, as they should. Walker added, authority isn't proven by force. Jonathan Price looked out the window toward the dark training grounds. It's proven by knowing when not to use it. Back in the barracks, Emily closed her eyes, breathing steady. She hadn't raised a hand. She hadn't needed to. And somewhere between the concrete and the command rooms, a line had been redrawn, clearer than before.